So many times when I'm breaking down traditional religions, for those who are moving from traditional religion into a conscious state, I oftentimes get comments like I did most recently that I am not viewing the biblical work through spiritual eyes, and that the biblical work or the Islamic Quran work or the Judaic work must be viewed through spiritual eyes. And I even had one most recent comment that said that you must understand the history of the author, the culture that it was written in, and the political arena that it was written in order to truly understand it, but then went back to saying it must be viewed through spiritual eyes. So in this video, we're going to break down some of these concepts of spiritual eyes, how you really get to having spiritual eyes, and the fact that most people who claim that they are viewing whatever spirituality that they have through spiritual eyes really do not understand it and are not doing it. So what's up, everybody? How you doing? This is your Coach Renz. And for those who are new to this channel, I want to thank you for being here, but go ahead and hit that subscribe button. For those who've been just watching and haven't hit that subscribe button, hit it again. You hit it as well. And the bell icon for any time we do any live events. Now, I know I have not been putting out videos as often as I previously have been, but that changes now. So please continue to subscribe. If you're finding me on one of the other social media platforms, come on over to YouTube and subscribe on the channel, even if you keep watching on the other ones, because there are some videos that you just won't get. And for all my patrons, I really appreciate you guys, because you are getting special videos that other people don't receive, because I appreciate what you do in the Patreon account. So if you're not a patron and you want these other videos and you want discounts when we do seminars and other kind of things, then go over to Patreon. I greatly appreciate it. So what we're going to talk about today is spiritual eyes, seeing through spiritual eyes. How are we going to get there? How are we going to develop this? Because no matter what you do, we work from the matter plane and the spiritual plane. So it is not everything is just here on the physical, but we have to work in a hermetic way of the spiritual, the mental, and the physical. But in order to get those spiritual eyes, there are some prerequisites, and we're going to develop this entire thing. So this video is going to be a little long. So just sit back, relax, get you a cup of tea, and have you a biscuit or something, and just enjoy this, because we're going to get deep. And I'm going to use, just to go ahead and get you guys in an understanding, I'm going to use the what is commonly called the J text, the E text, the P text, and the D text, and the redactor, which are the different texts that created what is known as the Torah, otherwise known as the Old Testament, the first books of the Old Testament, the Pentateuch. So that's going to be our basis. Although we're not going to get deep into what those texts talk about, that will be for another video. So stay tuned for that one. That's why you want to hit that bell icon. But we're going to use that. So when I go back and forth talking about those things, that's what we're talking about, P text. And these are the text that was written starting from about the 7th century BCE on down. All right, so, and you got to remember, it goes 7th century BCE would be like, that's your 800, 700. Then you go down into the 600s and 500s, and then it starts at 0 and go back up to where we are currently today. So 7th century doesn't mean 7th century AD like the 700 as we have it today, but in the reverse order. All right, so these are all BCE text, time frames of text. But of course, we must always remember that when we're talking about these texts, they were written as the writing of them came from a group that broke themselves away from the Canaanites around 1500 to 1200 BCE, and they have the influence of the Egyptian, the influence of the Sumerians, and the Canaanites. So many of the terminologies used in these texts, you will see them you'll see the similarity with the Egyptian, the Sumerian, and the Canaanite, but that's where they came from. So, but we're going to break down these understandings a little bit more as we go through this process. So this seeing with spiritual eyes. This is in today's world, you'll get approached by many people who are of traditional religions, and I'm calling those traditional and because they are traditional today. The ancient religions is the ancient understanding. That's what we look at. That's what we know true knowledge starts at. When the ancients, because they knew, they started with just the base. All things have been corrupted by man, but they started with a base, and that base, we got to go as far back as possible. But this concept in today's world of you got to see it through spiritual eyes when you disagree with me is really just an excuse that people use in order for them to not do scholarly study. Now, we all know that, as I've said before, scholarship of other people's scholarship is not scholarship. You have to be able to look and break these things down for yourself, to be able to come to an understanding for yourself, to have knowledge for yourself, so that you can then move in wisdom for yourself. And that's a keynote, because we will come back to that one. All right. But it is used as an excuse by most people that they go into study of a text concerning their spirituality with a predetermined landing point. See, if a person were to come to me and say that they are not racist, but they already have a predetermined landing point that all black people is this, and all white people is that, and all Asians is this, and all, Native Americans are that. But I'm going to study to see if I can have a different perspective of them. If you have a predetermined landing point, then you cannot. You see, when you look at the text, you look at J-text. J-text means Judah. It was written in the area of Judah. It was written by what would become the Israelites who had a preference for the ways of Judah and not Israel. You gotta understand, they had the tribes. They had Judah, tribe of Judah, tribe of Israel. These were warring. They had times of war. The J-text is written to make the Israelites look bad. But they had a political way of looking of their writing. They also, the J-text made God into more of a anthropomorphic being, meaning that he walked in the cool of the day. He smelled and loved the food that was cooked by Abraham. He had these human-like physical qualities, whereas E-text, which was written later the Elohist, you can say Elohist or Elohist, they looked at it as God being more majestic. The P-text also made him more majestic. But the E-text is more concerned with God as a being. P-text is more concerned with Aaron and everybody coming from the priesthood of Aaron, whereas the other text, J-text, it goes against Aaron. E-text somewhat goes against Aaron as well. So there's different political aspirations and thought processes in these writings. But when you have a predetermined landing point, then you try to make, this is where J-E comes in, where the redactor did the J-E text, which he combined J and E, and then later on added D. Right? And then later on added P, and then later on added D, and they kept redacting it. They kept changing. They kept trying to meld it together. But there were certain things they couldn't meld together, certain parts they had to leave out. There's a very important part I'm going to tell you later that they had to leave out, right, in order for the redactors to put it all together. But if you have a predetermined landing point, then you can't see how different time frames these things were written in order to push the agenda of a different group. You can only see it through the eyes of, I have a predetermined landing point, which makes you unable to accept the truth of what it really is. And we're going to also answer that question as well. So when we're going through this, you have to understand that if you already have a predetermined landing point, when I saw some of the chocolate covered Power Rangers down through Atlanta over this last weekend, where, as I was going from different visits, but I saw these chocolate covered Power Rangers. These are your Hebrew Israelites. They're out there in their purple robes looking like Power Rangers, and they have a predetermined landing point that black people are great and white people are all evil, that black people are the lost tribes of Israel and everybody else is going to hell, that we suffered through 400 years of slavery because of something that King James wrote that wasn't in the D-text at all. It was I know a lot of people go to the Codex Sinaiticus, but let's go even further back. And the D-text, which is the Deuteronomist, which is where the book of Deuteronomy comes from, that there was nothing in there, that verse that they claim, that they stand on, that they build their house on, wasn't in the D-text. All right, it just wasn't there. Now, if it wasn't in the D-text, which was written right around like 500, 400 or 500 BCE, if it wasn't in the D-text, how do you get it in the King James Bible? You see, that's where you don't want to accept the facts of what is truth and what is not. It just wasn't written. It just wasn't there. Never mind the Codex Sinaiticus that it wasn't in the Codex Sinaiticus. Never mind that. It wasn't even in the D-text, which is thousands of years older than the Codex Sinaiticus. At least 1,000 plus years older than the Codex Sinaiticus. So you have to be willing to accept truth. If you want to truly see spirit and understand a spiritual mind, a spiritual being, your spiritual being, not somebody else's, but yours, then get out of your mind, get out of your own physical way, get out of your own mental way, so that you can accept just pure truth, whatever it is. If the truth is not favorable to your melanin, then it's not. If another group had wisdom, then that other group has wisdom. This is why you guys hear me quote the Tao, why you hear me quote the Bhagavad Gita. I will quote, those other books of wisdom. Even I will quote what is in the biblical text if it has wisdom. I will quote what's in the Quran when it has wisdom. I'll quote those things because I could care less where it comes from, because I only look for truth. And weave within every lie is an element of truth. So the first thing that these people who say you don't see with spiritual eyes is that they already have a predetermined landing point. And this is what if you're going to call yourself conscious, you can't have a predetermined landing point. If I show you that their thing that the Sumerians came before the Egyptians, and that hurts you emotionally because you are so caught up in the Egyptians because you want everything to be melanated and from Egypt, well, sorry. The Sumerians wrote it before the Egyptians. But even the Sumerian story tells of things going on in the Apsu, which is sub-Saharan Africa. So if the teachings and understandings of ancient sub-Saharan Africa information is valid, is a beginning point, then it is a beginning point. If Atlantis is a beginning point, it is a beginning point. Whenever we dig up or find some more stuff that may be older, it is a beginning point. Wherever it is found. If it's found in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean or the middle of the Indian Ocean, then so be it. Be willing to accept truth regardless of how it makes you feel in your physical form. In your physical form. Because I'm just going to say it plainly. This ain't the first time you've been here, and you ain't always been black. Every time you've come here, you ain't always been a man. You ain't always been a woman. Hell, you may not have always been human. But don't get caught up into a race or a gender. Look to see through your spiritual eye of a spiritual being having experiences on the physical plane. I know many people like to say you're a spiritual being having a human experience. And right now you might be a spiritual being having a human experience. But in truth, you are a spiritual being having universal experiences. As I said in a video a couple of weeks ago, having an elemental experience, having an animal experience, having a mineral experience, having other higher conscious spiritual experiences. So do not limit yourself, because the moment you limit yourself, you're negating yourself and you're putting yourself in a box with a predetermined landing spot. So let's start breaking down some of the things about having spiritual eyes, how we develop this, because there's no point in me pontificating all this information and I don't give you guys a pathway to be able to start seeing beyond what is placed in front of you, beyond the mental plane and the physical plane, but actually deeper into the spiritual plane in itself. Well, the first thing is that we must dispense with the idea that most people have ignored this throughout history because of they ignored the literacy, right? So just because I grew up in a church when I was younger, when I was from 0 till 9, I was released from that church when I was 12. But from 0 to 12, the pastor couldn't read. Now, literacy is not an excuse for not thinking. Now, the fact that if you're illiterate, it makes it more difficult. But literacy in itself is not an excuse for you not thinking, because the way you overcome the issue of literacy is through critical thinking. It's through what I have taught you guys about the trivium. And we'll get a little bit deeper into the trivium in just a second. But let's just go ahead and say that just because a person reads does not necessarily mean that they are in the beginning stages of having spiritual eyes. You can be illiterate and still develop spiritual eyes if you develop your ability to critically think. But now we live in a world today where the majority of people are literate. So you have no excuse for not reading, for not coming to understanding, for not going outside of your traditional religious books, for not just reading the so-called church fathers and mosque fathers, this imam, that, this person, that. But you have no excuse for, oh, this is my pastor, this is my priest, and I'm going to just blindly follow whatever they say, because tradition is that you just follow the leader and you believe that they were sent by God and that they were there to lead you. Well, many of these people who you are claiming to have been sent by God turn out to be molesters. They are robbing the churches and the mosques and synagogues blind of money. They're robbing you of your money. They're treating you as a slave and telling you to wait for heaven for later. Don't worry about the pain and misery you're going through. They are themselves using more deeper spiritual methods of practice that they don't tell you about, that they're participating in. They don't tell you about the magic that they do. They don't tell you about the incantations they do. They don't tell you about the spiritual work that they do. They tell you the part that they know that most of you will sit up there and say that this is my culture, and because this is my Western culture, this is all we do. We just pray, or we just spin around 3 times and throw the piece of paper over our shoulder, or we just bring it to the altar, or we just take communion, or we just pray 5 times facing Mecca. We just tell you to do these things while they are in the holiest of holies doing something else. You know, I had a Jewish gentleman some years ago that we was having a discussion about the fact that I was saying, okay, I understand that until the temple is established in Jerusalem, that you don't do blood sacrifices anymore. You don't sacrifice the animals anymore because you're still waiting on your Messiah. I understand that teaching. But there was another teaching where they say that there are priests in Israel, and I've met some of them too, who they do the blood sacrifice of the goat, the ram, the sheep, the whatever, the doves, in Israel, and they do it, and the energy of that, the sacrifice of that, is spread to all the Jewish temples and all the Jewish people. So they are still participating, but it's like absentee voting. It's absentee sacrificing. So they're still within the realm of the power of the sacrifice, and I'm going to do a separate video just purely on sacrifices in coming months. But they participate in the magic of that ritual from afar, whereas most other people are participating in some type of ritual, some type of magic that is deeper than what they ever show you when you show up at church. But you don't know about it. And you don't do it because you're stuck in your current tradition of just pastor said, and pastor said this and pastor said that. So let's break down the idea that you have to start doing this research for yourself without a landing point and not afraid of the true facts. Many of you will say that, oh, that magic stuff, that's evil. Oh, that voodoo is evil. Oh, this ancestry edification is evil. All these different things that people are going to say, this is evil, that is evil. It's because your traditions have told you so. But I can tell you this. There are circles of people who are gaining in wisdom, who are gaining healing, who are gaining wealth, who are gaining happiness, who are gaining all these things. They're breaking binds, they're breaking curses, as y'all like to say, breaking generational curses. They're breaking curses by participating in magic rituals, by participating in these things that you will say, oh, that's Illuminatis, that's Masonic, that's secret society, that's devil this, devil that. But they are experiencing heaven on earth while you're just experiencing hell, waiting for a heaven after earth, not realizing that you're going to create nothing but a hell for yourself when you leave this existence. And the reason why is because you refuse to open your mind and to open your heart, to open your spirit, to open your eye, not your eyes, but your eye, to open yourself so that you can actually live with spiritual eyes, so that you can actually be a spiritual being that's having this universal experience. Or as the Gospel of Thomas says, oh, how woeful it is that something as divine as the Spirit has come to dwell in such poverty. Has come to dwell in such poverty. See, the Gospel of Thomas, they got rid of that one because they didn't want you to know about those kinds of things. They didn't want you to know that until you get your feminine and your masculine energy in unison together, that you truly can experience the kingdom of heaven that is all around you and inside of you. They don't want you to know that. They want to keep that away from you. And as long as you continue to not think, to not use your brain, to not use thought, to not use that divine energy inside of you, you will continue to exist in that format. Trust me, I've done it. I've been there before. For a long time, I've done it. And still suffered through it. I carry other people's emotions. Well, at least I used to. But I had to break that curse of carrying other people's emotion. I refuse to carry your emotions anymore. I refuse to carry, we broke up from a relationship. I've been carrying your emotions. I'm not carrying your emotions anymore. You wanted to date me, but it didn't seem to work out. So I'm not going to carry your emotions anymore. We had a business deal. It didn't work out as well, but I've been carrying your emotions all this time. Our friendship ended and you've hurt, you still butt hurt about it. And I've been carrying your emotions and that sort of thing. All these different things, I've been carrying other people's emotions. And instead of living my best life, instead of experiencing all the heaven that is within me, I've been allowing myself to go to vacillate between heavens and hell in this existence simply because I was being stuck. You're being stuck. We're going to unstick you. We're going to unstick you. All right. So that first thing we need to understand, I like the idea of the trivium, because the trivium, although it comes from the Romans understood it from the mystery schools of Pythagoras, and from Pythagoras, the mystery school within the Near East, and from there, the mystery schools of Egypt, and from Egypt, Samaria, the gods told us down in the Apsu, in the emerald tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. So it's a teaching that if you want to say it's Roman, it's only because you want to start with Rome. If you want to say it's Greek, you want to start with Greek. If you want to say it's Egyptian, it's just because you want to start with Egypt. But if you true, it don't matter. It doesn't matter where it started, who you pull it from, whose language you use, whose variation of it you use. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's your application of it. That's what matters. So if you truly want to see with spiritual eyes, first, we got to get the physical and the mental plane in order. That's why the Gospel of Thomas, the Gnostics, who were killed by the hundreds of thousands, the Gnostics were pushed out of dominant existence because they understood that in order to know thyself, to know God, you have to know yourself. And to know yourself, then you know the God within. You know the God, and God is within. Is it not written that ye are gods? In order to do that, you had to know that you didn't place it on somebody else who did a blood human sacrifice for you. You didn't place it on anybody else, who rose up into heaven and supposed to come back down and land on top of the mosque and then climb down the ladder. I mean, if you descended that far, what you need a ladder for? You didn't depend on that. You didn't have to satisfy dharma, right? You just had to know the knowledge, know thyself. And true knowledge of thyself is knowing the spirit of thyself. Right? So in order to do that, we have to understand that the first thing is knowledge. Gnosis. That's what gnosis means. Knowledge. That through knowledge that you find out who you really are. You find out, understand. If you want to know your heritage, where your family comes from, you have to gain the knowledge of it, right? If you want to understand the Torah and the Abrahamic religions, then how can you not know J-text? How could you not know that in J-text, when Abraham was supposed to kill Isaac in J-text, that no angel showed up to stop him and there was a ram in the bush? That in J-text, he followed through and killed Isaac, and Isaac was never spoken of again. So he followed through and committed the human sacrifice to show his allegiance to El. J-text tells you that. That's what J-text says. E-text and P-text eliminated that, and all of a sudden there's the stoppage of it because there's a ram in the, now that there's this angel shows up, and then there's a ram in the bush. So for a couple of hundred years, Abraham sacrificed, human sacrificed Isaac to show his allegiance to El. And then a couple of hundred years later, that story was repugnant to the people of Israel, that the people of Judah had wrote that. So the people of Israel were like, no, we can't have that. That in J-text, that El, Yahweh, was known to Abraham. And in E-text, he's known to Abraham, but as Yahweh. But then in P-text, don't nobody know the name God. The name God has never been known. But he clearly told him that it's known. If you go look in your Bible now, it tells you that. You'll see that in the Judges and all that kind of stuff. Nobody knew who God was, right? Nobody knew. Deuteronomy, nobody knows the name of God. But then you look at Genesis, and with Abraham, he says, yes, I am Yahweh. I am your God. He knew his name, clearly. This is why people, see, the reason why people say there are contradictions because J-text, P-text, E-text, D-text. They all wrote different things at different times for different reasons. And they all had different historical reasons for writing these things. I believe, I'm not quite positive, but I believe P-text was written when the what became the Israelite Hebrews were coming out of captivity in Babylon. And so they was very caught up into the priesthood and the priesthood coming out of Aaron. And they were very caught up in the idea that because the priesthood is coming out of Aaron, that they need to abide by the laws because that's why they was in slavery in Babylon. And whereas E-text is like, yeah, we support Aaron, but, you know, the word of God can be spread and kept by everyone. But then the Deuteronomist text is like, no, only through the line of Aaron can the word of God exist. So these contradictions are occurring because you have different people writing at different times. You weren't in Babylon, you was near the Assyrians and everybody, but now you are in Babylon. You know, you're coming out of Babylon. Or it was written when Egypt had conquered the Canaanite lands and then you were separated from the Canaanites. Or when you was coming from Canaan out of the Canaanites and you started saying that in order to separate ourselves, we're going to change Baal from Baal to El. And we're just, because Baal, we're going to change it to El because you had Adonai, which equals Lord, and then Baal, which also equals Lord. So we're going to change it to Adonai. Adonai, Yahweh Adonai, Jehovah Adonai, however they say it. So you have to understand, you have to get that basic knowledge of this historical time frame, to which most people who are saying you don't see it through spiritual eyes, you can only see it through the intellectual mind. Without the intellectual mind, your spirit can't divine what it's seeing or understanding, because you're just reading now from the redactor. The redactor who said, we got to formulate and put this together because now by the time the redactor is writing, the Hebrew people have been established. So since the Israelites and the Hebrew people have been established, now we got these stories. You go on this block, this dude is talking this way, that block he's talking that way. So let's bring it all together in one cohesive unit. So the redactors went in. That's why you got JE text and JED text, and JEPD text, all of them together. And it's an easy research. It's an easy research for you. You can research it. You can find it. I'm sure somebody else has made more in-depth YouTube videos about it. So I'm sure if you just put that in there, you'll find it. All right. These are things that I didn't have the internet when I was in my 20s. It didn't exist in the format that it does today. But when you do that, knowledge-wise, you understand the culture, and then you start understanding the authorship. That the people who keeps telling me that, oh yeah, you got to understand the authorship, but then you got to see it through spiritual eyes. You have to go a little bit farther. Then you got to go a little farther. The next part of the trivium is understanding. Is that meaning you got to take all the knowledge and put it together. I will say that one of the benefits that I've been blessed with is the ability to, I can read something over here today. And then I can read something 6-8 months from now, but my mind will connect it to that today, to what I heard then. It'll connect it all together. It's kind of like, well, if you're looking at the story of Genesis, right, where you're talking about some God separate the waters from the waters. Then you look at the Egyptian story where Ptah and Nu, there are waters above the water. And then you look at the Ephah story where you got, I think it's Oshun, and I forget the other name, where there's waters and waters, the salt waters and the fresh water, but waters above the waters. You have the same thought process, waters above the waters. Now, many people, they'll say, well, Genesis wrote it first because that's how God did it and everybody else copied it. No, they wrote their stuff before. Sorry, they existed way before. So you have to put these things together. Matter of fact, in putting things together, I had somebody write this whole little diatribe thing, and I just wasn't even going to bother answering it because it was just because it's just too much. And then one of the statements is just like it'd be too difficult to deal with. But they talked about that America, black people are indigenous to America. You see, because they're seeing through physical eyes. Black people are indigenous to America. We shouldn't leave America because this is ours and that sort of thing. But the fact they were saying that when the big earthquake happened and Pangea separated and everything flooded, the people who were on that side, the American side, they stayed there. Okay, I'm sorry, but there's no proof of any human existence during the time frame of Pangea. Okay, there's no human existence on the planet during the time frame of Pangea. At least none discovered. So that's just a statement of I think, I wish, I hope, this is what I want it to be. But there's actually, absolutely, as much as we say that you prove the Bible, prove the Quran, prove, you cannot make a blind statement that we are indigenous to America because of Pangea and we got stuck on that side when the earthquake happened. All right. But even if that did happen, that doesn't mean that every person who is of melanated skin tone in America is from those people. All right. It doesn't mean that either. That would be saying you're negating the trans-Sahara slave trade, which led to the transatlantic slave trade. You would negate that. And I would dare not negate what our ancestors went through, at least what my ancestors. I tracked my ancestry to the fact that they were part of the transatlantic slave trade. So I wouldn't negate their existence and let that piece of knowledge, that understanding go away because you want all black people to be from the native black people here. You will also negate the black people who left East Africa, migrated through China, probably established the Chinese people, according to one Chinese geneticist, and then migrated over the Bering Strait and spread out through the Americas, what is known as the Americas. You would also be negating all those people too. You would negate the Zai missionaries who came looking for those people. They came looking for the people that they knew crossed over. You would be negating all those people as well. So knowledge must be brought into understanding, cohesive understanding, in order for you to be able to then gain a vision bigger than your physical form, than the physical world, the physical understanding, than the physical plane, so that you can go to beyond the matter plane A and B and go ascend to the mental plane A and B. See, understanding is getting into the mental plane. See, knowledge is the physical plane. Understanding, we're getting into the mental plane of existence, the mental plane of understanding, the mental plane of seeing through mental eyes. Because now you see things differently than just based on the traditional categories that we put people in. I talk about how race exists only on the physical plane. But as we get into the mental plane and the physical and the spiritual plane, race don't exist anymore. Gender doesn't exist anymore because spiritual beings don't exist in that format. So, but you got to get into that understanding where you don't have that landing point, but you can move into that realm of seeing things, of putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And you have to remember, when you put a puzzle together, all the shapes aren't the same. There are odd shapes of odd pieces that fit perfectly together. So you have to be able to see that. And for that, you have to understand the time frame. You have to understand the cultural situations. What are the political implications that are going on? Like I've said, Judah was pissed off at the Israelites, who were the Elohist. So the J text is mad at the E text and want to make the E text look bad. But the E text is also mad at the Egyptians, so they want to make the Egyptians look bad. So if you want to know why your Old Testament always talked down about Egypt, it's because the Elohists, the Israelites at that time frame who were coming out of the slavery of the Babylonians, talked bad about Egypt. Also, Egypt had killed a lot of them, had destroyed them. It is in around 1200 that there's an Egyptian, I don't want to call it, it's not a cylinder seal, it's something, I forgot what it's called. But it's one of the first times it speaks about Israel. It talks about how it laid waste to Israel. Before that, in the 1400 BCE, was the first mention of Yahweh. If we was talking about the J text and they're talking about Yah. So, you know, these things were mentioned during those time frames under the reign of, one was under the reign of Imhotep. So you have to understand and what's the political what's going on politically, how people feel about neighboring nations, the Hittites, the Canaanites, how they feel about the Canaanites. You know, the Canaanites ostracized those who wanted to follow just El and not how they believe El had a wife named Asherah. So, you know, God, El, Yahweh, originally had a wife named Asherah. So, but they had to get rid of that. And that was one of the things that ostracized these people from the Canaanites to which they were a part of. Now, when that happens, they fight back through making them look bad in their religion, in their book. So you got to understand these politics that are at play here. You got to understand these politics big time. Because at this point, what you should understand, when you have understanding, you understand a key concept. And I want you to hear this concept. Is the Bible an accurate book of history? The answer would always be no. Of course not. It's not an accurate book of history. It does not tell the history of the planet, the history of people. It does not tell you, like the Babel. The Tower of Babel. Many of you look at Babel as language, not understanding that Babel, Bab, meaning gates, El, God, gates of God. It's not language. It has shit to do with it. It has nothing to do with language. It's about the gates of God. Because the Tower of Babel was built because they, you know, in the story, because they wanted to ascend closer to God. So the gate of God has nothing to do with language, but we've converted that to language today. But Marduk, in the Sumerian story, built the tower in order to fire rockets, to fire weaponry at his enemy who was Enki at the time. So it was a war machine. It was a tower for warring, for fighting. You know, and if you look at some of your castle builders in medieval times, they built towers and they put their archers, their artillery set up on those towers so that they can have a farther range to hit the enemy before they got close enough to them to fire their artillery. You know, it went into the invention of catapults that the tower became ill-advised, that it wasn't such a powerful mechanism. So you have to understand these kind of things in order to have this. So is it a book of history? No. But is it a book of the opinions of people during a time frame? Yes. When you have an understanding, you realize that this is the opinion of the J. The Judah was writing this based on their opinion when they wrote their portion of the Torah, their version of the Torah, their version of the Genesis story. That it was the version of the thought process. It was the accurate thinking of the Israelite people when they wrote E-text. It was the thinking of the people coming out of persecution when they wrote the P-text. It was the thinking of people still coming out of persecution when they wrote D-text. And it was the opinions of the redactors when they had to put it all together to try to bring a cohesiveness to people who were of different tribes trying to come together under this God Yahweh, under this God El, under this God that they were trying to separate from Baal. Remember, there's a verse, and you guys find it for me, put it in context, where he says that you would no longer call me Baal, but call me Yahweh, which is a huge thing. Like, understanding makes you say, what the hell? When you look at the Psalms, And the Psalms say, this one was written by one of the magicians of David. What? Magicians wrote this? They wrote this Psalms? Magicians? So this must be a magic spell. This must be an incantation. This is not a song. This is not a prayer. This is not a praise. This is an incantation. Because it was written by the magicians. And then people later try to say, oh, the magician, they mean the people who played the music. No, that's a musician, not a magician. So you have to understand that. And yes, some of them were written by musicians as well. But you have to be able and have the cultural understanding of it in order for you to do it. So we continue with this thought process. Now, the last piece of that is wisdom. Wisdom. When you gain wisdom, you understand cause and effect. You understand that it's not history, but it's opinion of people during a historical time frame. That when you look at those things, you start to see things through a spiritual eye. Because no longer are you attached to earthly attachments. No, you begin to release your earthly attachments. You want to open that crown chakra? Release your earthly attachments. You start to release those attachments. Now, once you release those attachments, now you're starting to have spiritual eyes. Now you start looking at your experiences a little bit differently. Most people, again, will go and say that, well, I don't need to have all this knowledge. I don't need to have all this understanding because I've experienced God's saving grace. I've experienced God's blessings. I was faithful in my tithing and he gave me a financial blessing. And their experience without knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, without that knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, sorry, I didn't put it in the right format. Without that knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, because the Bible says it wrong. It says knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. No, you got to go knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Without this knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, your experiences are in ignorance, basically, because you're not understanding how you had the experience. Yes, you prayed for a financial blessing. And then you got a check in the mail because you overpaid on your taxes. Cause and effects. I overpaid on my taxes, so they have to pay me back by law. It just happens to come at a time where you were destitute. But you wouldn't have been destitute if you understood the wisdom of count the cost. The wisdom of don't spend more money than you make. And even if you went through some kind of turmoil where you lost a job, you lost your income, or something like that happened, and that check happened to come, well, the time frame, why did you lose your job? Did the company shut down? Did Amazon beat them out of business? Did Uber or Lyft beat them out of business? Did Walmart beat them out of business? Did the internet somehow beat them out of business and you saw it coming but you chose to ignore it? Did the purchasing of all those subprime loans not indicate to you that the market was going to crash? Did not all this money that was going into Silicon Valley for anything.com did not let you know that this was coming to pass? If you studied history of finances, of economies, then you would know that every economy rises, every economy falls. Around 2022, this economy will go through another fall, another crash. And how big it will be? Will it be as big as the dot-com crash? Probably not, because not as much money has been poured into it. But all these so-called non-subprime loans that they're starting to give out, they'll cause a crash in the real estate market. So if you lose your job, is it because there was a blessing on the way, or were you just not paying attention? Because if you were playing defense, you play offense now. If you start playing defense in about a year, knowing that this crash is about to come, preparing yourself to buy up all these properties that are going to be available in 2020, 2022, 2023. If you're ready to buy those properties, then it's not, that time frame is going to be a financial blessing for you and not a financial crash. If you're paying attention to how Amazon is growing and how Walmart has now been going out and buying and getting involved in as many .coms as they can and starting to mimic Amazon in certain ways, if you start seeing these things, then you start seeing how the economy is going. What products still require you to go out and have that experience, still cause you to go out and buy something personally, on what products you can buy online? How is Siri affecting your life? How is Echo affecting the world economy in the next few years? When you start having that wisdom, then you recognize that these are not miracles. These is not your experience of God. This is just your experience of sitting there ignorant and then you hoping and praying, but then you could have been in a much better place. When that money did come, that could have been, oh shoot, I got even more money to buy more properties. If you're trying to go buy a hotel right now, and you have to look at how Airbnb is affecting those things. And when that money comes in, oh, I can go buy more properties. Or how about you being attentive to your money and not overpaying in your taxes and giving the government a free loan? How about that? How about your knowledge, understanding, and wisdom cause you to not give the government a free loan? You see, these are practical things, but you don't want to have practical things. You want spiritual things, but you can't see the spiritual things until you understand what is the difference between practical and spiritual. You're stuck in practicalities. You're stuck in the material plane, the matter plane, the physical plane, the mental plane. You can't get to the spiritual plane until you understand knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, until you make those things part of your being, until you start understand the alchemy of it all. And when you do this, then it provides that insight for you. It provides that ability for you to know. And when you have knowing, then you can be a creator. Then you create. Then you manifest your destiny. When you understand the magic that is behind things. And I know some of you are going to say, oh, he talking witchcraft. He talking hocus pocus. He talking all these different things. But the Pope goes up and he kneels at the shrine of the Black Madonna every year. He give offerings and bring offerings and gifts to these different shrines. They got these people going and touching the feet of statues and this sort of thing, offering gifts of candle and light and food offerings. You go to it. Let me ask you this one. Almost all of you, if you're in a Western culture, you know that you can go to a Chinese restaurant within like 3 miles of wherever you are. Most people. 3 miles, there's a Chinese restaurant, there's a nail salon, there's some of those things, right? Within 3 miles of you. And they've been there for a long time. They rarely go out of business. They rarely go out of business. But in most of them, either out front or somewhere in the back, they have a little Buddha statue or a little dragon or a jade animal or something. They got something that represents their, if you're talking ancient African, if we're talking African ancestry, they got something that represents their Orisha. They got something, if you're a Christian, hell, they got something representing their guardian angel. They got something representing their deities that protect them or provide abundance or wealth or something. They got some symbolism of it. And what do? They put grapes by it. They put fruit by it. They offer to feed it all the time. They're doing this magic. What is it that they don't do? They don't run commercials. They're not running Facebook ads. They're not up here doing all those things. Now, I'm not against running Facebook ads. I think that's great business. I'm not against running Instagram marketing. That's great business. I would do it. I do it. But what they don't do is that they don't ignore the magic of feeding the Buddha, of feeding the jade turtle, of feeding the jade dragon. If some of them, you look up in the top corners and you see that dragon up there, that's watching over them, providing protection. They don't ignore the feeding of their spirit animals. They continue to do that, and they are not advertising. They're not marketing to you, but you keep showing up. Their business keep thriving, and you think it's some kind of something political or racial going on. No, they know how to use that magic. They're using that magic. You got those priests over in Israel still sacrificing the ram and the goats during certain times of the year, special sacrifices. They still doing it. You still got people doing their voodoo and they still doing their sacrifices and they getting what they want. They getting what they desire. They having their heaven on earth, but you not. Because you don't want to open your mind up. You don't want to allow for that knowledge, that understanding, that wisdom to open you so that you can see that there's a lot more going on than what's in front of you. There's a lot more than going on what you've been culturally conditioned to in a Western society, that you got to get back to your roots of understanding that we are spiritual beings, but we're living in the poverty of this flesh. But in order to get back to that, we have to get back to our old ways of doing things. We have to get back to those things that the Western culture has shut down, that they put the blinders on, the veil over your eyes, so that you can't understand how to truly contact and connect with that spiritual realm, that spiritual world. And as soon as you do that, you will start changing your life. You'll start seeing when you got enemies out there. You'll start seeing when there are blocks in front of you. You'll start seeing how to overcome adversities. You'll start seeing how to open the roads up for you to be able to have opportunities that you couldn't have before. You'll start seeing all these things start happening and moving towards you because you're manifesting those things. You're causing those things to come. And not just I'm sitting here thinking about it. You know, you got to be an adept, a master in order for you to just sit and think about it and it happens and it comes. You have to be an adept to be able to just take 2 steps and it comes. But for most people, you're nowhere near that. So since you're nowhere near that, just like learning how to walk, you got to crawl, you got to walk, you got to stumble around a little bit before you can ever start running. And even when you start running, I learned, I ran in high school track, but they didn't teach me how to run. I didn't know about the drive, top speed, and cruise. I didn't know about how to drive. Didn't know that. And then come up and then cruise. I didn't know that. It wasn't until I went to the Marine Corps and I ran on Camp Lejeune track team that I learned that there were stages of the sprint. In high school, I just ran. Knew how to come out of blocks, but then I just ran. There are stages. You got to go through the stages. You got to go through the stages to build your spiritual eyes. And if you want to go through that, you have to be able to be willing to learn, be open-minded, not be so culturalized into the Western world, and be able to say that, you know what? Whatever it is that I need to know and do in order to have my heaven on earth, to allow my inner God and goddess to come out, to understand what spiritual ancestors or orishas or guides or animal guides, whatever method you want to go with is got my back, is watching out for me, is trying to tell me to go right or go left. Even if you got a jinn, you got that good jinn and that evil jinn on your shoulder, because sometimes you need to listen to that evil jinn who's telling you that you need to be strictly business and let your emotions go. You can't take care of everybody. You need to take care of yourself. Or you got that good one that say, you know what? You need to be more loving, more giving. You need to be more patient. You need to know how to listen to the 2 jinns. Whatever method you want to use, you need to know how to use it. And most of you don't know how to use it. And stop listening. For all these people who say, oh, you got to see the Bible through spiritual eyes, go get some knowledge. Go get some understanding. Go get some wisdom. And then you come talk to me about that. But until you can, like before I make these videos, all quiet on the set. All quiet on the set. Because you're not ready. You're not ready. Because you don't even know your own book. You read 3 chapters and you think you know something, but you don't. You don't know the history of your book. You don't know where your book came from. You don't know how your book was put together. You don't even, I just talked about those J-text, E-text, P-text, D-text. This is probably your first time ever hearing about it. And if it is, woe to you. Such a spirit that come to dwell in the poverty of the flesh. And if you don't even know the Gospel of Thomas, that's sad. It's just 114 sayings. But there's a lot of wisdom in those sayings. A lot of wisdom. Just like one of those things is, until the woman becomes like a man, until you see the woman as you see a man, meaning until you see the woman as equal to the man, you will never be able to develop and grow and see the kingdom. The kingdom of that God is not for you if you can't see the woman as a man. That's an inner talk. Until you see your feminine energy as equal to your masculine energy, you can't have the kingdom. A lot of you guys are walking around talking about, I'm an alpha male, I'm an alpha male. But you're so male energy dominated that you don't have balance between your masculine and your feminine. Therefore, you're not an alpha male. Not a true one. You're still a beta because your ego is running too much game in your head. I'm going to do a whole nother video about alpha males and how to truly become an alpha male and what a real one is. Also, so women can recognize a true alpha male, but also so women can understand how to be a true alpha female as well. Because it's not all about dominance. It's not all about dominance. Because that's why the books all talk about being a servant leader. That's why in the Marine Corps we talk about in order to be an effective leader, you have to be able to serve your troops. Right? Plain and simple. You serve your troops will follow you. They'll break your neck for you. That's how you do it. That's how we do it in business. That's how we do it in life. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Matter of fact, I know you guys enjoyed this video. If you stayed to the end, let me know in the comments that you stayed to the end of this video, because right now I just got so much love for anybody who stayed to the end of this video. But I love this video because it's taking me back to how I used to do videos when I used to get deep and we used to go into it. So if you stayed to the end of this video, let me know you stayed to the end, because that's like, damn, I'm so thrilled about that. That's like so much love. I appreciate it. So, hey, if you like this channel, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel and keep subscribing. Share the videos. We're going to start doing a lot of things. I got a lot of things I'm planning. I'm going to tell you guys, I've been going through some massive back issues over the last month, 2 months. So that's what has thrown me off. But I got you guys. We back. We here. We getting it down. But a lot of things gonna happen. We're gonna have some seminars and start probably in February and in March. March definitely gonna be in Miami. February we're gonna be here in Atlanta. So and then we're gonna look at some other places, other dates to do some other videos. I mean, other seminars on finances, building wealth, building our spirituality, building our relationships. We get those things. We get 360 degrees into the person, and nothing but greatness after that. And yeah, I'm wearing Passport Global is the shirt that I'm wearing, so go check my man Passport Global, order his gear, some great gear. Another young lady, she told me she wanted me to wear one of her shirts. Contact me, I can wear it. I appreciate you. But y'all have a great day. Remember, you gotta free yourself to be yourself. Why? Because your greatness is non-negotiable.